All right, so welcome to Math 344, Lecture 12. This is the marriage secretary problem. This is potentially useful for trying to solve the backgammon doubling problem. And again, I care about the backgammon doubling problem for a couple of reasons. One is I like backgammon. And if you play competitively, the doubling is extremely important. When I was a grad student at Princeton, I had the fortune to know John Conway. And he had a deal that if you could get to 100 points against him in backgammon, he would switch jobs with you. And you could become a tenured professor, and he would become a grad student. So I kept track of all the games we had in my running total. He would not always play to win. He would play for what would lead to a more interesting game. So you do have some incredible opportunities if you know when to double, to really take advantage of key situations. The reason I'm doing this, of course, in this class is that this is indicative of a greater problem. How do you take into account the position and the expected return, and how does that influence what your strategy is? If you take something complicated like baseball, it's not so bad. There's only 24 possible game states. We have our run expectancy matrix. We have a good idea of what various people are going to do. If we are now trying to decide, do you want to pinch hit for someone? We can try to look at, well, what would be the expected value of putting in that pinch hitter? What is the cost of pulling somebody out? It used to be a lot more complicated back when you did not have the designated hitter. And if you pull the pitcher, you then all of a sudden lose that pitcher for the rest of the game. For something like football, it's even worse in terms of how many game states you can have. I am a huge supporter of walk before run. If we can't figure out what should our strategy be in something simple like backgammon, how are we going to handle something as complicated as football? So let's just try to figure out what should we do in backgammon. And so it's a very simple question. Do we double? And then if we're doubled, do we accept the double? Out of curiosity, how many of you have seen the marriage or the secretary problem? Okay, so if you've seen the problem, if you remember it, you've become very, your throat is hurting today, you're very hoarse and you can't speak. If you don't remember, you're welcome to speak and contribute. So I have taught this problem, I think every year I teach probability. I absolutely love this. This is a screenshot from, I think around 2016. My daughter was sick, so she came in with me that day, and we just brought in a bunch of figures from the house to represent the marriage problem. So you could either say marriage, you can say secretary, it's pretty standard. You have a collection of people, which since we are mathematicians, we will name 1, 2, 3, ... n. And the way it works is the people enter one at a time. So just for definiteness, do we want to do marriage or do we want to do secretary? Secretary, okay. So they enter one at a time and you have to decide, should I hire them or not? If you make them an offer, they will immediately accept because it's you. What could be better than working for you? If you don't make them an offer, they will kill themselves because they can't imagine life without working for you. You need this for the marriage problem because I have to make sure that there's no chance of a hookup later or something like that, or a relapse or whatnot. They are eliminated from all consideration. Once you say no to them, they are unavailable. You do not know the values of the people you're going to see. But you can always compare people. You can always say, is this person better or worse than the people I've seen? Okay. So I don't know what the maximum value is. If I knew the maximum value was 100 points and I see somebody come in at 100 points, oh, I know you're the best. In real life, you often won't know that. And so just for definiteness, so see one at a time when C either offer or decline. If offer, accepted. If decline, killed. So unavailable. Okay. What do you think our goal should be? Hire the best. So I love it. You have a really ambitious goal. So we will make this into a binary problem. We either hire the best or we don't. This means if you have the second best person, we consider that as bad as hiring the worst person. Is that a reasonable assumption? No. In the real world, there's a huge difference typically between the second best person and the worst. And what might happen is you might eventually get to the point where the phrase is called lowered expectations, where after a while you start getting very worried that you're not going to get anybody good. And so you might say, I'm going to settle, this person is good enough. And then the question, of course, is at what point do you start settling? I do have one student who has decided that he is going to use this to choose his spouse. I will say he is still single, and it's been many, many years. One of the big issues in life is you may not know how many people there are. So I had another student who gave a wonderful math colloquium on Valentine's Day, and it was not a coincidence, on what would you do as your best strategy if you have a unknown n, but you know n is drawn from a given probability distribution. How would you modify this as to which is your best? There's lots of ways you could do this. You could also weaken things from hire the best to hire one of the top 2 people, or hire somebody in the top 5%. And depending on what you're willing to accept as a success, you can get very different strategies. Can someone give me a strategy for hiring the best? Simplest strategy you can think of. I don't care how good it is. Give me a strategy. And what's the probability that you will get the best? Hire the first person. Hire first. It's the least amount of time that you have to spend. What's the probability of success? What would that be? 1 over n. I love your strategy. It's extremely easy to analyze. In fact, any strategy could be hire the kth person. If hire kth, then the probability that the best is 1 over n. Okay. As we take more and more people, what's the probability that we get the best? It's going to go smaller and smaller and smaller. So just to quickly recap, have you seen the marriage or the secretary problem? Okay, so we see people one at a time, and we're trying to find the best person. If we don't have the best, we consider the second best as bad as the worst person. And if we make someone an offer, they accept. And so one strategy was, hire a fixed slot. Whoever's in the kth slot, I'm going to hire. That's going to be a probability of 1 over n. So here's my question. What do you think the best possible probability of finding the best is going to be? So over here, this is a probability that tends to 0 fairly rapidly with n. Do you think you can get as well as 1 over square root of n? Do you think you can get as well as 1 over log of n? Do you think you can actually get a positive probability of having the best person? Do you think you can get more than a 50% chance of getting the best person? Do you think that there's a strategy where you'll get the best person 100% of the time in the limit? So we'll assume that the people are equally likely to be in any order. So the best person can be anywhere. The second best can be anywhere. There's no relations between them. You don't have the really good people clumping in and walking in together. All n factorial orderings are equally likely. Is there anybody who believes that in the limit, we can get as close to 100% as we want? Okay, so no one believes we can get as close to 100%. What about 50%? Does anybody think we can do as well as 50%? See, I'm starting high and I'm lowering down until I get at least one person who thinks I can do at least this well. So do you think you can come up with a strategy where you get at least 50% of the time the best person? All right, what about a positive percent? It could be small, maybe it's 10 to the negative 8, but a positive percent of the time is n goes to infinity. I'm still going to get the best person. All right, so I've got at least one person there, 2 people. All right, let's go from the other side. So let's start off with, we know we can do at least 1 over n. Who thinks we can do at least as well as 1 over square root of n? That's much, much better. We have two people who raised their hand for positive percent. Your hand has to be up here, right? So for those of you who don't think we can do as well as a positive percent, do you think we can do at least as well as 1 over square root of n? Is there anybody who doesn't think we can do at least that well? That, you know, the best person can be almost anywhere. We're not really going to be able to do much better than like 1 over n. Maybe we could get up to log n over n or something like that. So this is a very specific problem. We have a very clear definition of success. You know, best or bust. Nothing else is going to count as a win other than the best person. There are many strategies you could employ. You know, the simplest strategy is we always choose the kth person, but it's clear that that's not going to be a great strategy. The strategy that works extremely well is you look at the first couple of people and then you choose the best after that. So here we call it so strategy build intuition, maybe. Look at first k, which will be a function of n. Choose first one better than the best seen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a sense of the field. I'm going to try to see what's out there. I'm going to look at the first k of n people. And then I'll take the first person better than the best that I've seen. I absolutely love this problem. All right, so if we wanted to draw it, here's person 1, 2, 3, ... k of n plus 1, ... n. So we sample here. And then over here, take first better than what we saw in the first k of n. What does this mean about the first couple of people who are interviewing for the job? You won't offer them. Are you going to tell them this? No. I was at a math conference that, you know, for years gave awards for best student talks, and I hated these awards. There's a lot of reasons why, but one year they really screwed up, and they had the award ceremony before all the talks were given. What did students deduce when they noticed that the award ceremony was before all the talks were given?
Pre-decided.
Well, what do you mean by pre-decided? Not necessarily. They don't necessarily have to have already chosen who the winner is. If you go after the award ceremony, you know you have no chance of winning. So that they had done some preliminary cutting and had eliminated certain people from consideration. And people were quite upset. So the solution is either A, everybody is under consideration, or B, don't be obvious about it and have the award ceremony after the last talk so that everybody thinks that they were under consideration. I was eventually able to get them to stop giving prizes, and what they did instead is every student had a professor or a postdoc or a grad student go to their talk and give them feedback, what was good, what could be improved. In something like this, the first k of n people who come in have no chance at all of being chosen. So if your best person is in the first k of n, you automatically lose. So what is the probability you lose? Just because the best is in the first k of n. So we'll lose if best is in the first k of n, happens with what probability? So what's the probability that the best person is in the first K of n? I'm sorry?
K over N.
It'll be K of n over n. Right. I'm just writing K as a function of n to say that it's going to depend on what I choose. So the larger K of n is, the greater chance I have of automatically losing, just because the best person happens to be in the beginning. So this is going to give me a pressure. This is going to make me want to make K of n small, right? So want K of n small to decrease this probability. And again, this is not the only way we can lose. It might be the case that the best person is not in the first K of n, but we're going to find somebody better than the first K of n before we get to the best. This is just a lower bound on losing. My lower bound on losing is K of n over n. So the larger K of n is, the more people I look at, the worse it's going to be. Okay, so that's going to give me pressure to make K of n small. Is there going to be any pressure to make K of n large? So what would be the pressure to make K of n large?
If the second best person is in the first K of N, but the best person is not. then
Okay, so if,
the second best.
okay, good. So the second is, if the second best is in first K of n and best is not, we win. More generally, the shorter it is, the more likely it is, however, that we will see somebody better than the best before we reach the best. This, not the short, I guess the smaller. Smaller K of n means more likely to find someone better than the first K of n, but not best. So this makes us want K of n to increase. So we have two competing influences. The larger K of n is, the more likely it is we're going to lose, because we're going to just see the best person and not even consider them. So that makes K of n want to be small. But if K of n is too small, it's going to be very likely that we'll come out and meet somebody who's better than our small sample before we get to the best person. So this is true in so many problems in mathematics. You have these two different competing influences, and you need to try to find some happy medium. Okay. So let's try to calculate. So what we want to do is we're going to split into cases. So assume best is at m. Okay. So if m is less than or equal to k, then we lose, right? So if the best person is in the first K, we automatically lose. So without loss of generality, assume K is less than M is less than or equal to N. Okay. So, just, draw where things are. Here's 1, 2, here's K, here's M, here's N. And these are the ones we're sampling, and the best person is at M. What is the probability the best is at M? What would that probability equal? So what's my probability that the best person is located at spot M? Yes.
1 over M.
1 over what?
1 over M.
Why 1 over M?
because you're looking at the probability. Oh, wait, no. 1/n.
1/n, right? I have n spots, and the best person is equally likely to be at any one. So the probability that the best is at m is 1/n. What I'm doing is I'm doing very similar to the basketball game when we did the hoops. We calculated what's the probability Bird wins on his first shot, on his second shot, on his third shot. What's the probability I win when the best is at k plus 1, at k plus 2, at k plus 3? And so now we know that the probability I'm in this case is just 1/n. And now what we need is, what is the probability we win? And this means given the best is at m. That's what we need to find out. And then the probability of a win would just be a sum. M goes from k plus 1 to n. The probability we win, best at m, times the probability best at m. And this part, of course, we know is just 1/n. And that's what we need to figure out. Okay. So we're breaking it into cases. This is a case analysis. We just have to figure out what is the probability we win, given that the best is at. Okay. Any questions on the configuration? Okay. It's probably now taking me more time to just cut and paste, so I got to remember. All right, so there we go. So let's try to calculate what is the probability we win. So what must be true if we're going to have the best person at m and we win? So I can draw a little bit more. Here's m minus 1, here's m plus 1. What must be true if I'm going to win? So what must be true? Yes.
Everybody from k plus 1 to n minus 1 has to be worse than the best person.
Okay, good. So everybody from k plus 1 to m minus 1 has to be worse than the best in 1 through k. There's a cleaner way of phrasing that. Yes.
The best candidate from 1 to n minus 1 is within the first case.
Yes. So the cleaner way of phrasing it, what you said is correct. The cleanest is, so this happens if the best of the first m minus 1 is in the first k. Question? Did you guys have a question or?
Oh, I just missed the setup of this.
Oh, okay. So the setup is the following. So we're seeing people one at a time, 1 through n, and then each person, when they come in, we have to decide immediately, do we keep them or do we reject them? If we reject them, they kill themselves because they cannot imagine life working for anyone other than ourselves. The problem is we don't know what the best one is going to be. We don't know when they're going to come. All configurations are equally likely. All we can do is we can just compare people relative to the other people we've seen. We can just say, are you better or worse than what we've seen? And so one strategy is we can just hire whoever comes in first, or 13th or whatever, just pick a specific spot. And that's going to win 1/n of the time. And the question is, can we do better? And if so, how much? And you only pick one person. So the people are coming in one at a time. And so the strategy we're going to do is we're going to look at the first k of n people. And so we have to figure out exactly what that should be. It's not surprising that it's going to be a function of n. We don't know what that function is yet. And we're going to look and see and get a little bit of a feel for the lay of the land by looking at the first k of n. And then we'll choose the first person we see better than the best we saw in our sample. So anybody in the first k of n is automatically excluded from winning. We don't tell them this, but they really have no chance. And now the question is, what is the probability we end up with the best person? So we're going to break this into cases. We'll assume the best person is at m. That happens 1 over n of the time. And we now need to just figure out what's the probability that we win with the best person at m. And we saw that this is the same as saying that if you look at the first n-1 spots, the best person is in the first k. So what's that probability? So the probability, the best of the first m-1 in the first k is what? Remember, everybody's equally likely to be anywhere. So what's the probability that the best is in the first k of the first m-1? It's just k over m-1. You know, I have a bunch of spots, dot, 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 dot. So here's m-1, here's k plus 1, here's k, here's 1, here's 2. And I'm just saying, I need to choose one of these. So for the best of the first m-1. So I have k slots that work. K slots of m-1 work. Right? So when you look at what fraction of the time, I just need to choose one of those slots to be where the best is. You know, maybe it was, you know, this one over here. So the probability that I win is going to be k over m-1. So we know now we go back to our formula over here. Let's see if I can do a better job this time. Yeah, so I've pasted more centered. And so now we can replace this. This is going to just be k over m-1. Right, that's what we just showed a moment ago. So the probability we win is just going to be a sum. M goes from k plus 1 to n of k over m-1 times 1 over n. Right? So this is going to just be k over n, the sum, m goes from k plus 1 to n of 1 over m-1. Does anybody know approximately what that sum is? Log of n over k. So I can write this as k over n, and I'll do a little bit slowly. I've got k over n, the sum, let's say m goes from k to n-1 of 1 over m, just, you know, shifting things over by 1. And then this will be the sum, m goes from 1 to n-1 of 1 over m, minus the sum, m goes from 1 to k-1 of 1 over m. Because if I want to sum from k to n-1, it's the same as summing from 1 to n-1 and then subtracting the sum from 1 to k-1. Everybody okay with this? The reason I'm doing this is the harmonic sum. And we know what the harmonic sum is. If I sum up to x, it's approximately log x plus a constant. Well, that plus a constant is going to cancel with both of these. And so this is going to be approximately, you know, so we use the sum, m goes from 1 to x of 1 over m is about the log of x. Is it plus or is it minus? Does anybody remember? I forget which way it is. It's Euler's constant that comes in. I can't remember if it's a plus or minus. So plus or minus some constant, I forget which way it is. And then an error of size, I believe 1/x. So when I subtract, the constant is going to cancel from both of them. And this is going to be k/n times the log of n-1 minus the log of k-1. So it's k/n, the log of n-1 over k-1. Okay. And I just have to figure out what value of k makes this as large as possible. So we've reduced this to essentially a calculus problem. So I want to maximize n over k, the log of, I think I have n-1 over k-1. Or did I? Oh, no, it's k/n. Okay, good. I was about to say, because this looked wrong. Excellent. And if you look at what's going on, if you look at the k/n, does k want to be large or small? Does that make k want to be large or small? Large. So makes k large. What about the other piece? Well, the smaller k is, the larger the fraction. Makes k small. So I have two things pulling me in opposite directions. I can try the extreme cases. If k equals, well, 1 is going to blow up. If I take k equals 2, what will I get? And again, you have to be a little bit careful. If you take very small values, then it's not so good to approximate the harmonic sum as we've done. So there's a little bit of an issue if I take k not to have any independence. But if I take k equals 2, that's going to give me something like 2/n, the log of n-1. So it's something like on the order of the log of n/n. So that's not horrible. It's at least doing better than 1/n. Look at the first 1 or 2 people, take the first person better than that. That's already enough to do pretty good. If I take k equals n, then that's going to give me 0. Clearly, that's not going to be best. And so I want to try to figure out what's the best I can do. So in order to make life, I'm going to just study, k/n, the log of n/k. Right? I'm not going to really worry about the -1s. Okay. So this gives me my function f of x equals the log of x/x. So x is just n/k. And a k/n in the numerator here is the same as 1/n/k down below. So how would I find the value of x that maximizes the log of x/x? Differentiate. I look for critical points. And I've already done the endpoints. So critical points. I want to solve f prime of x equals 0. Well, okay, how do I take the derivative of log of x/x? What do I use? Hasn't been that long for you guys. Come on. What do I use to take the derivative of log of x/x? Quotient rule. So I'm going to get the derivative of log of x, which is 1/x times x minus log of x times the derivative of x, which is 1/x², and that equals 0. So I want 1 minus the log of x equals 0. Therefore, what does x equal? E. Or n/k equals E, or k equals n over e. This is why I'm not really worried that it's n minus 1 over k minus 1. The best value of k is a significant fraction of n. It's a positive fraction. It's 1 over e. So what this is telling you is you're looking at a pretty sizable percentage. So one of the things you should be able to do is get a rough feel for numbers. Can anybody tell me approximately what's 1 over e? And if you can't, can you give me lower bounds and upper bounds? 1 over e is at least what? It's at least a third, right? Because 1 over 3 is the third, 1 over 2.7, that's going to be better than 1 over 3. So it's at least 33%. Can somebody give me an upper bound? 40%. Because it's better than 1 over 2.5. So it's somewhere between 33% and 40%. It's actually, I think, about 37%. So this is telling us look at the first n over e, or about 37%. Take the first that is better. And you win with probability. So it's going to be k over n times the log of n minus 1 over k minus 1, which we said is basically k over n, the log of n over k, with what does n over k equal again? That equals e. So this is going to be k over n is 1 over e, the log of e. Well, we do log space e. So that's 1 over e, or about 37%. This should amaze you. 37% of the time, you're going to end up with the best person. This is one of my favorite results in all of mathematics, one of the most surprising results, that you can do this much better than 1 over n. 1 over n is going to 0 very rapidly. 37% of the time, we have the best person. Do we all agree that this is, we'll be very careful because this is being recorded and I am married. I'm happily married, happily married. 37% of the time you end up with the best person. I will not try to dissuade people from believing that you will find your soulmate and you will find the best person for you. But if you consider that and only that a success, if you know how many people there are, this will give you a victory 37% of the time. If you are willing to accept the second best, I think it goes up to about 50%, a little bit above 50%. And then you can play games. What if I have somebody in the top 2%? What percent of the time will I end up with something like that? Obviously, the more inclusive you are in terms of what you accept, the better. Now, of course, there could be dangers with a strategy like this. What is a possible danger with a strategy like this? Yes.
The first person is the best person.
Okay, so one possibility is that you could immediately eliminate yourself from finding the best person because they're in the very beginning. But okay, but what else could be bad about something like this? What happens if we don't end up with the best person? Yes. You have to take the last person, right? Now, it might be the case that we might see somebody who's better than the first K of people before we hit the best. So one possibility is we find somebody who's better than the first K, but they're not the best. Okay, well, in that case, they're at least better than 37% of the people. So it's not horrible. So if choose someone better than the first K, but worse than best, at least better than 37% of the people. If have to take the last person, it could be bad. Yes.
How would you ever end up taking that?
Well, imagine the best person was in the first K. And so I'm looking for who's the first person better than what I've seen. Oh, crap. And so what you could do is you might try to adjust your strategy and say, I am willing to trade off a little bit on the quality of the person I take to protect myself from the disaster of having to take the last person. And then you can figure out just how much are you willing to trade. If you have a 95% chance of getting somebody in the top 5% and a 5% chance of getting the worst person, are you willing to roll the die like that? This is to some extent how risk averse are people. You can look at expected values, but expected value analysis works best when you have many iterations of the process. If you're only doing something once, your risk is huge. As an example, this is going to be purely hypothetical. I'm feeling extremely generous and I'm going to give someone in the classroom $490,000. Do I have any volunteers? I mean, this is basically who's awake right now. Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm feeling really generous. I'm going to give you $490,000. Well, actually, I'm feeling even more generous. I'm going to give you a chance. I'll flip a fair coin. And if it's heads, I'll give you $1 million. And if it's tails, I'll give you 0. Which would you rather do? The $490,000 guaranteed or flip the coin?
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. The extra $10,000, especially with in expected value, the marginal utility of the first $500,000 is much, much greater than the second $500,000. What if I'm unbelievably generous? I've been talking to some nice donors, they're going to back me, and I'm willing to do this 1,000 times with you. Would you like to do 1,000 coin tosses or the 490,000 every single time?
Coin toss.
Yeah, at that point, you're doing it so many times that you would clearly, be better off because the expected value is high. So in something like this, there's a lot of fun things we can do in terms of, pushing this problem forward, in terms of protecting ourselves and whatnot. What I love about this is a very simple strategy to implement. We're looking at building intuition on the space. Sample the first K of n and choose the first person better than that. Why am I talking about this? Well, we've been trying to analyze backgammon and doubling. So maybe we'll have a critical threshold. I will double as soon as my probability of winning reaches a certain point. Okay, yeah. I'll just show this right now. So I had just put up some code in Mathematica to just actually simulate this. And so this is a very simple program to run. You just randomly choose people, go through and see when does it happen. And so I did 1,000 people 10,000 times, and I tried to calculate how often do we get, I think, the best person. And I think everything worked out as you would expect. All right, so why do we care about this? Let's go to backgammon. I want something clean. So double if the probability of winning is greater than or equal to, let's say, PW. And then you accept if probability of, do you want to say winning for the second person or do you want to say losing? I'll just keep it vague. Of winning is less than or equal to P accept. And maybe we'll call the first one double. That's probably a better index. So over here, the key point is clearly going to be 50%. There'll be some point over here where as soon as we hit here, we're going to double. And then if the probability is too high, we're not going to accept the double. So there'll be, maybe some range, I don't know, maybe over here, which will be where we accept. Oh, so now it's shifted back to green. Okay, is this clear? And so that's what we want to try to figure out. And I think one way that you could attack this, and again, if you can find another way, by all means do that. This is a really simple strategy. If my threshold reaches a certain critical value, I will double. And then if I need to decide whether or not I want to accept, and again, if you accept, you now control the doubling queue. So there's at least a nice symmetry. And so we can do the situation where you can only double once, and maybe the person who's accepting can't double you back later. We could do the situation where each person gets to double at most once, or we could do the situation where people can double as many times as they want. I talked about how one way to play this is that maybe you have 10 points, 100 points, 1,000 points, and the first one to get to a certain threshold wins. And so if you have a 60% chance of winning, you've got 60% of the points. And you could try to see, how would the strategy change based on the number of points I have? Is it going to converge to a certain critical threshold? One of the problems with this model is, as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into the game, if the game is pretty even, you might end up having some kind of discreteness issues. If there's only 10 points, you may not be able to get as close to what you want for that critical, do I double or not? And we saw this in some things when we did the decomposition problem, you're trying to break things up with 2s and 3s and whatnot. So you might want to have large numbers, or you might want to try to find some kind of other analog of this game in terms of percentages rather than this model. But is this clear? Does everybody understand what the goal is? So you can try to do this theoretically. You can write a computer program to try to explore this. If you don't have experience programming, let me know. And if you can, try to get something that you can report back to me on Monday, but let's say it's not due until Wednesday. If you need more time than that, let me know so I can adjust lectures accordingly. But I want to try to come up with what should our strategy be in backgammon based on stuff like this. All right, so this is a good place to stop. Later on, we need to figure out how to find the values of various positions, but that's not what's going on today.